Hello and welcome to this quick MFA tutorial. With lots of people working from home now, we want to secure our systems, but we don't really want to affect people in an adverse way if we can help it. So the key here is to say that we will put an MFA policy, a multi-factor authentication policy, onto their accounts for when they are working remotely from the office. But rather than do that blanketly across the whole company, we're going to do it in a way that if they do go into the office and we detect an IP address that it's coming from, which is a trusted IP, then of course we can just bypass the MFA protocol altogether. So to do that, first thing we're going to do is set up a security group for this. So as you can see, I'm already in our little simple AD for security group, and I'm going to create a new group which we're going to call MFA Enforce. Just a simple setup there. Now we do need that obviously inside the Azure AD, so I will flick over to my AAD box and I will very quickly go to PowerShell. As you can see, I will run PowerShell with admin credentials, one of the key factors here, and we will start AD sync, press tab, get to our setup here, policy and delta, and that will speed up the replication of that security group into Active Directory. So while we're just waiting for that to happen, what we do here on the setup for the MFA is we log into Microsoft Online with our normal account that we would have, our global admin, and configure inside the Azure Active Directory. As you can see, we just go into the admin command here and we can have a look at our main setup. And under show all, we can go down the bottom here, we'll find Azure Active Directory. And under AD, the part I'm interested in is going to be security. And you can see that's not all the way down the bottom, but just there, just in security. And first thing I want to do is put the conditional access policy. I don't want to do the MFA just yet. I'm going to put conditional access in here, because conditional access is where we put in here. These are the named locations which we need to put in. So we need to go into named locations and create a new one. So we will call this one the Telesoft Office. Now this is based on an IP range, and we're going to mark it as a trusted location, and we will give it an IP range of what the company is, which is clearly this is a fake address, but for this purpose it works. And you can see there, just by adding that in, we have a trusted setup for the Telesoft Office. Now that's very important for what we're about to do in the conditional access policy. So now to create the conditional access policy for the MFA itself. So we will go into this section here of new policy, and we have quite a lot of things to fill out here. So the first one is give it a name. So we'll call this one Telesoft MFA Enforced. And we are going to apply that to select users and groups as an included factor. So we'll say users and groups here, and if I look over on the right hand side, I can see there's our MFA enforced group, which I must go and select to say yes, we are going to enforce it into that particular group, and we hit done on that one. Then on the cloud apps and actions, I'm going to assign this and include all cloud applications here. Now I know it says don't lock yourself out, because obviously it affects everything. Because we are going to apply it to a certain group of people, we are going to be able to be a bit more specific than that, so we're good. So we hit done here. And conditions. Now this is the interesting part where we get to put in the different locations. So firstly, we're going to say what sign-in risk are we talking about. So yes, we are going to configure a sign-in risk. We get the option on these to turn any of these off or on as we need to. So in this case, we want to be quite strict with it. We're going to say yes, configure it, and we will configure for all types of risk, apart from the no risk. I'm not worried about that one. Then device platforms, I will configure this one also, and I will say I only really care about these three: Android, iOS, and Windows. So we shall do that. Mac OS people, for this particular example, I'm going to leave alone from the MFA. So done here. And locations. Now, this is where we get to do the trusted locations, and this is why we don't just blanketly turn on MFA for everybody, because yes, I want to configure this one, but what I want to do here is I want to apply this conditional access policy but exclude the selected location of, as you can see here, the Talisoft office. Which means if you are in the Talisoft office, you are excluded from this policy. So that's the best way to think about that. From a client apps perspective, I want to have this one as browser, and I'm going to secure everything here. And on the device state is also, this one is in preview as well. We can just choose to configure this one or not. I'm going to say no. It's to do with the hybrid Azure AD joined. If it is marked as compliant, we will leave that one in that state. So we'll say done on this one here. So for the next config, we decide what access controls we are going to grant. So if we scroll down slightly, in this case we'll say grant, and we are going to grant access, but we're going to require multi-factor authentication. We do have other options to go through here. We can require the device to be marked as compliant, require it to be Azure joined, and the like, but for this particular purpose, multi-factor authentication is what we're after, and we've got the option to require all of the selected controls or just one of those. So we'll say select on that. And under the session here, you can see what we are going to be doing with this one is just basically leaving things alone. I'm not concerned about this particular one. I'm not particularly concerned at this point about things like sign-in frequency and the like. We'll come back to that in some other sessions if we start getting some issues with lots of people attempting different logons from different countries and things like that. So we'll come back to this one. And lastly, we are going to enable the policy. I'm happy with it. It's one we've done obviously plenty of times before. We can use it as a report only policy, or we can turn it off here, but in this case we will say we will turn that policy on. So with this all done now, we will just hit the create button on that policy, and that validates it, and you can see it now sets it. It'll take a few minutes to set it, but that won't take very long at all. And we can just run back now to our policy, and absolutely, actually yes, that is quite correct. We can go back here and we can have a look at the security and the conditional access policy. And you can see now we have Talisoft MFA enforced, and that is sitting with a state which is on. Now, before we can all just go home and say, hey, that's all good and live, there's two more steps we want to do. Firstly, we haven't put any users in that group yet, so nobody is getting MFA enforced at all. But before we do that, what we might want to do is tell these users that they are about to be MFA enforced, and they can go ahead and set up the MFA ahead of time before it is actually required to be enforced. So what we do is we send out a communication to them saying to them, go to this web address. Now the web address to go to is an HTTPS, and it is aka.ms/MFA setup. And this is going to take a user through the process of setting them up. Now it's going to ask them to log on first. Now I've already logged on with this particular user into this account, but this is for Peter Gibbons, and what we'll do there is set up the additional security verification that he wants. Now he wants to set it up with the mobile app, and he wants to receive notifications for verification off of his phone. And very easy, because all he does here is hit these options here and say set up. and that will configure the mobile app. Now all it requires you to do is to download on your phone the Authenticator app and to scan the QR code. So once we go into Authenticator, I'm just going to do that now on my phone, which I realize you can't see, but we're going to add a work or school account, and I will take a picture of that. Now once we do that, it will then add that to the phone, and I can say next, and it will check the activation status for that. And there we are, that has been done. So we then say next, and we need to make sure that it's working. Now I'm getting a message on my phone saying, do I approve a sign-in for Talisoft for Peter Gibbons at talisoft.com? I hit approve, and we should see that one go through, and there we are, successful. Now, as the next step here, we can say, yes, I'm going to put in the phone number. Just in case we lose the mobile app, we can have a phone number instead of. I'm going to pause this screen while I put this phone number in, but just bear with me. And as you can see, those updates were then successful, so I will close that one out. And you can see it just takes us back to the profile for Peter Gibbons. So what we're going to do here for Peter is we will now go, and I'm just going to restart his machine. So do that. Now what I will also do is, while we're just doing that, it takes us back to our domain controller, which we were there before, and I'm going to add now Peter into the group, and obviously we need to speed up the sync across there as well, and just give that a minute to reboot his machine and then come back in again. Okay, so we're back as Peter Gibbons. We are logged back in again with a nice fresh session, and now what will happen is he's at home and he's logging on to his Google Chrome. He wants to get into the Office applications, which he can do just by going into, say, portal.office.com. It will ask him for his login information, as you can see here, Peter Gibbons at talisoft.com, and ask for his password as normal, which we will put in here. And now the additional step is going to be that it doesn't work. Fucking hell. Now our last thing before we just go back and test this Peter Gibbons user is I'm just going to jump back into the 365 console, because what we do need to do is in our active user list here, we need to go into the multi-factor authentication and we need to turn that on. Now you can see we can do a bulk update across a lot of people. In this case, I'm just going to say Peter Gibbons, and we are going to enable the multi-factor authentication. And you can see here it's even giving us the link we were talking about earlier, and the deployment guide if you haven't been through that already. Say enable at this point, and multi-factor authentication is now enabled. Now we just quite easily, that does happen very quickly, we can easily jump back to the workstation for Peter, and we can go into his portal, which is portal.office.com, and log him in. Now after his password prompt, he should get an extra prompt, approve the sign-in request. Now that is prompting on the mobile device from the Authenticator app that it needs to do it, so we hit approve there, and by doing so we'll then allow him through into this application, and then he can get through to the applications as he would be able to do. So the key thing for Peter is if he was sitting in the back of a cab or something on his way home and he starts getting these authentication requests on his phone, he knows that somebody's trying to access his account, and he should definitely deny those. But thank you for watching today. This is the Get to the Point videos. Hope that was helpful, and I will talk to you again soon. Thank you very much.